What's up, guys? It's a rainy day here in Texas, so we're out here working in the garage. A little bit tight because I can't pull the car out, but we're going to try to wrap the exhaust and then see what else we can get to. So if you remember from my last video, we got our little short exhaust pipe, and I was kind of talking about how there's a good possibility it's going to be really, really hot on my leg on that side. So I did kind of take some of your advice from the comments and decided to wrap it. I got some of this titanium exhaust wrap. I think it's going to look pretty good, but we'll see here in a little bit. I'll throw a link to this wrap in the description below. It was pretty inexpensive. I think it was like less than 15 bucks, and it's 2 inches by I think 50 feet, which is going to be way more than enough for this tiny exhaust. So we're going to go ahead and pull these pipes off, and then we'll get to wrapping them. This exhaust wrap is titanium, like I said, so you don't have to wet it like you would with a traditional kind of fiberglass weave exhaust wrap. So what I'm going to do is kind of measure out and figure out how much I'm going to need, then leave myself a little bit of extra. And what I'm thinking, and I haven't really tried it this way before, but I think it might work out well, is I'm going to put in like one side of it into my little vise here, and then kind of step back to where it's tight, and then I can just twist, you know, nice and tight, and kind of keep pulling on it and keep tension, and wrap it, you know, overlapping probably 1/4 inch or so with each wrap. Like I said, these are really short, so it's not going to take much material, and we're going to have a bunch left over, but that's how I'm thinking about doing it. At least I'm going to try the smaller one first and see how that technique works out, and if it doesn't, then we can kind of switch it up. But that's my plan of action now, is to hook one side into the vise and then start to pull it tight and wrap it around and see how it works. It did come with these metal kind of, I guess, like zip ties almost, that are designed for the end. So we're going to get our length of wrap cut out and get to going. Here's what first pipe looks like. I think it turned out pretty good. I would have liked to have used one little clamp on the end there, but I don't know. I guess it's kind of hard to end it on such a small pipe. So I ended up just doing 2. I think it'll be fine. But it seems to be pretty evenly wrapped all the way around. No crazy bulges or anything. So we're going to go ahead and move on to the slightly more complex one. Just a kind of word to the wise here, definitely wear gloves. This stuff is very similar to fiberglass, to where there's like tiny little strands of it, and it will like get into your skin like little splinters and itch and sting and be pretty terrible. So 100% of the time you're touching it, wear gloves. So I also totally nixed this idea because it was just not working out really well. Plus this isn't really held down, so when I pull tension on it, I could have just pulled this thing right off. So if that was bolted down, it might have worked better if it was my bigger vise. So I'm going to go ahead and get to work on this one. I'm just going to basically put that on the ground, and I can just keep rolling the pipe in my hands, keeping it tight. And that one will be a little bit more complex, but when we get towards the end, I'm going to make sure I end it at basically the same point that I ended that first one. So I'll probably put them back on the bike and just kind of make a mark where I want to end the wrap, just so they can be, you know, kind of even. So wrap job is all done. It didn't turn out perfectly, but I think that's all right, because, you know, obviously the kind of whole overall theme of this bike is a little bit of imperfection, and, you know, nothing is supposed to be perfect and shiny and symmetrical, and so I think it's going to work out fine. If it was a nicer if I was going for like a show quality build, I would probably redo them. But like I said, I think it's kind of fine the way it turned out. I mean, it's going to be 100% functional. I wrapped it nice and tight, so it's going to stay on there. I used 2 of these steel clamps on the end here to hold it on. So, I mean, only time will tell for sure, but I think it turned out nicely. I mean, I think it fits the theme of the bike. I like that it's almost a bronzy color. So that kind of brings in the theme too, and hopefully it'll keep my left calf from getting cooked while I'm riding. So definitely wear the gloves, pay attention to when it like kind of touches your forearms and stuff when you're wrapping it, because I didn't do that, and now I have what feels like tiny little splinters all over my arms. which is not terribly fun, as you can imagine, but not too bad. So that's how they turned out. Let me know what you guys think. I think it looks pretty good. So I kind of want to show you guys what I'm thinking with my chain tensioner. So let me grab that real quick. So here's the chain tensioner I got. It's from Monster Craftsman. I'll throw a link to this in the description as well. But basically there's just a spring in there that's designed to kind of create a little tension on the bottom of this chain. So the ideal spot would be to kind of weld it on that crossbar right there. But with my fender being where it is, it would kind of get in the way. So I'm trying to figure out a way that I can mount this. That the ideal here is that this bottom part of the chain is what the tensioner rides on, so not the top but the actual bottom part, and the chain is going to be traveling, you know, this way. So you want this kind of tensioned over, like, I know it's kind of hard to explain, but kind of this way, pushing back at it so that the chain's kind of rolling over the top and not kind of jabbing into it and getting like pulled. So anyway, so basically it needs to be kind of mounted towards this direction, kind of leaned over. But as you can see, I don't really have the ideal spot for that. So what I'm going to need to do, and I'm not necessarily going to do it this video because like I said, it's Hurricane Henry or whatever here hitting in Texas, so it's completely nasty and disgusting outside. So the car is in the way, so I can't really get to my welders and get to all the stuff that I need to. So I'm going to have to kind of postpone this until probably next weekend or so. But just to kind of run this by you guys, I want to kind of get your ideas of what's a cool way for me to mount this. Like, do I just put a little tab off the middle here and mount it up in there so it would kind of be something like up in there? Do I just kind of mount it off the front? I don't know. I need some help kind of figuring out where to mount that where it can look good, because like I said, it needs to be kind of behind, or technically in front of this fender. So, yep, just letting you guys know what I did decide to do with the chain tensioner. It came in pretty quick, so we'll get that fabricated and mounted up here pretty soon. All right, guys, hopefully the camera's in focus there, but I wanted to kind of end this video with a Q&A. In my last video, I asked you guys to jump on my Instagram and just throw up some questions either about the bike or cars or my history or whatever. So I'm going to kind of run through some of them and answer as many as I can. Let's see. How do you learn all this stuff? So I learned most of what I do in kind of two places. So a lot of the automotive related stuff, I did go to school for a while at a place called Universal Technical Institute. It's was in Houston. I don't think the one's there anymore. So that's where I learned kind of general, electronics and that kind of stuff. A lot of it, honestly, was kind of before YouTube. I'd watch a lot of like Saturday morning car shows and just soak up as much of the information as I possibly can. I did a video that I'll throw a card to now about how I kind of got started in bikes, and that kind of goes into a little bit more detail, but basically a lot of just getting out and playing with stuff and breaking it and learning how it works. And bikes are very similar to cars in the way the electrical systems work, and they're still, four-stroke gas engines and stuff, so they're pretty similar. So a lot of it's just honestly getting out here and kind of messing around with it, watching YouTube videos just like you guys are now. What's my day job? So my day job, I work at a software company, so we build a communications app mostly for like cell phone retail stores. I am the head of product development there, so what I do is basically oversee sales and operations and customer service and all that kind of stuff. So I don't really have anything to do with the technical, software side. I'm not an engineer. I don't write code or any of that. But kind of everything outside of that portion of it, I kind of oversee. So software, sales, and implementation, that kind of stuff. If that makes any sense. I know it's kind of vague, but you get the general idea. How do you avoid taking a loss on a project when it comes time to sell? So all of my projects, aside from this one, I got with the intent on flipping it and basically selling them when I'm done. So I keep a very detailed spreadsheet with what I paid for the bike, every single part, what I paid for it, down to the cent, including shipping and everything to my door. That way I can also keep track of like a list of all the parts I want. And then I even color code it, so it's like, hey, I want this part. Okay, it's, you know, if I order it, I'll make it yellow. Once I receive it, I'll make it green. That way I know kind of what's on the way, and can kind of get an idea of timing on certain things based on when the parts are going to arrive. So what I do is, like I said, keep a very detailed spreadsheet. I buy bikes that I know very, you know, confidently what the resale value is. That's why I've built a lot of these like CB550s, because I know what they sell for and I know what they're worth in my area. I also did a video on how to make money selling motorcycles. One of my first videos, so bear with me if it's terrible, but I'll throw a card to that right now as well. And that kind of walks through my process of how I find a project, basically looking through Craigslist, stuff like that, how to gauge what bike might be a good one for you, kind of based on your skill level, how to find deals that maybe other people are missing, and kind of go into a lot of detail there. So basically, that was the long version of I just make sure I know what the bike's worth. I make sure I know exactly what I'm putting into it, and then I don't count my labor as, you know, a cost, which in a real business you would do, but I would be out here doing that regardless anyway. So I don't charge myself for the labor, but that's how I keep track of everything. And so far I have not lost. I've actually made a good percentage of margin on all of the bikes so far. So this one, I'm kind of going after it, not really having a budget. I mean, I do obviously have a budget, but I mean, I'm not going after it to try and make sure I can make the most profit. I'm building this one for myself. I may end up selling it next year. Probably watching this, David, my uncle-in-law, has his eyes on it, and he wants it real bad. So if I ever do let it go, he'll have first right of refusal for it. Okay, what advice would you give for someone who wants to work on bikes on the side and not go bankrupt? Start with a small project. I would say, you know, give yourself a budget, put aside, you know, you could probably build a bike for, in my area, $1,000, $1,500, depending on the bike. You know, it's going to be a less sought after model you're going to start with, but if you're just wanting to start tinkering with bikes, I mean, I've bought bikes for $300, so you don't have to start with like a big project. What I would do is try to find a bike that you're interested in. That way you want to keep working on it, and you're not just like trying to put together a bike you really don't care about. But just start small, like grab it, you know, get a couple of parts and just start tinkering around with it. There's so much stuff you can do to a bike without spending any money. Just a lot of cosmetic stuff, and, you know, taking stuff apart and cleaning it up, and, you know, wire wheeling stuff. And there's a lot of stuff you can do on a bike to enjoy it and spend time that doesn't actually kind of require tons of financial kind of input. So I would start doing that and just, you know, start saving up money, get yourself at least, you know, $1,000 or $1,500, I would say, is probably your entry level. Then just start having fun. And if it takes you a year to build it, and that's fine. You had a year's worth of entertainment, and then, you know, hopefully you can turn around and sell it for more than you have in it, and you make some money and you had fun doing it. So that's kind of how I got started. What is your favorite style of bike to make? Definitely classic bikes. I mean, obviously classic Octane. I'm into all the old stuff. So the newest bike I've ever owned is a 1996. But most of the bikes I build are from the mid to early 70s. So most of them have been Hondas. This is the first Triumph I've built. I've worked on a couple, you know, Yamahas and stuff like that. But my favorite bike is pretty much anything from the 70s. Most of what I've built has been that like brat cafe style bike, and I totally love that. But I was just ready for kind of switching it up, and I was getting really familiar with those bikes, and I wasn't really pushing myself when I built them. So I wanted something that completely took me out of my comfort zone, and that's why I started the Triumph. Let's see. When did you get into building bikes, and what was the hardest part of your first project? So I built my first bike probably 4 years ago, 5 years ago, something like that. It was a 74 Honda CB750. The hardest part of that, I mean, honestly, I was just so green that a lot of it was kind of difficult, but really fun for me. So I really didn't run into any real big issues. The one thing I did kind of run into, now I'm thinking about it, that it was like a total one-off thing, is there was a Misfire that I was chasing down for weeks and weeks and weeks, and I could not figure out where it was coming from. And I finally found out that it was coming from like the number 2 cylinder header pipe just had like a little bit, I don't know if the, copper gasket was like crushed too much or whatever it was, but it had the slightest little movement. So if it came and let too much air, it would misfire. But then it wouldn't other times, which is why it was like the hardest things to track down are the ones that are intermittent. So of course it was never doing it when I was trying to find it, and then I'd ride the bike and it'd be doing it, and I'd get home and it would stop. But basically that was the hardest part for that particular build for me to find. Nothing is super complicated on these bikes, guys. Like, I know a lot of things like electronics and stuff totally scare people, but when you really just sit down and kind of look at it, it all makes sense. It's all just nuts and bolts and wires, and I mean, there's nothing like that crazy. And if there's enough resources online to be able to get you through, especially if you start with a bike that's pretty well known. I mean, there's so many forums and like people that have built them, and I mean, that's part of what I'm trying to do here is like help you guys and kind of encourage you to start new projects, and part of that is to kind of give you guys the knowledge to do that. What's a good first bike? Let's see, it depends. Okay, so there's two ways to look at a first bike. So do you want just your first bike to learn to ride and just enjoy and take it out on the street? If that's the case, I would say probably, I mean, most people would say a 250. I started on a bigger bike than that. I probably wouldn't go classic bike, which I know is probably weird for you to hear from me since I'm into them so much. But the reason I say that is because with a classic bike, you're worried a lot about the bike itself while you're riding. You're like, is it going to stall? Is something going to break? Is it going to shut down? Is it going to start again when I go to leave the grocery store? You're worried too much about the bike, and you're not learning how to ride the bike, if that makes sense. So you're not paying attention to the cars and how you're actually controlling the bike, and where you're riding in the lane, and all the really important kind of fundamentals of riding, because half of your mind is constantly thinking about the bike. So for a first bike, I'd get something a little bit newer, a little bit more reliable typically, just so that you don't have to worry about the bike itself while you're learning. A project, that's kind of different. So I would start with a classic bike if it's intended to be your first project. Maybe you already know how to ride a bike and you want to build one for the first time. What I would do is start with a bike that is mostly complete, if not all the way complete, that really just needs maybe some tune-up work, some cosmetic stuff, but overall, the motor runs, or at least runs in some capacity, so that you're not going to have any issues with compression and having to dig into the top end of a motor or something like that. On a first project, that's going to be too much. And the reason I know that is because my first project was technically a CB360, which is still sitting on the side of my house in the exact same condition that I bought it in almost 5 years ago, because the motor needs to be completely rebuilt. And it just was too much of a project, and now I just have kind of steamrolled into other stuff and haven't gotten back to it. So for a first bike, and I know this is a long answer, but a first bike to build would be something smaller, something pretty close to running condition. My CB750, that was my first project that I actually completed, would run if you sprayed like carb cleaner into the carbs, so that I knew that it was pretty much a fuel delivery problem. Carbs most likely just needed to be cleaned. And I was able to get a good deal on it because the person that was working on it before wasn't familiar enough with it and didn't know what the problem was. So I was able to kind of, fix it and get it running, on its own gas pretty quickly, even though it was my first project. So shoot for something that's pretty complete and, nothing too crazy, ambitious as far as you're not cutting the back half of the motorcycle off for your first bike. All right, next question. What made you pick up a camera and post videos to YouTube? So my very first video, you could probably go back and look, it was working on my brother's Yamaha Virago. And what made me pick up a camera and start? I mean, I've always liked making videos. My friends and I kind of always made videos when we were in high school, and I'm dating myself, but back then it was, a video camera that actually had tape in it, and, which I know sounds like I'm an old man now, but so we just always liked messing around and making videos, and I enjoyed the classes I took in school that were like making videos and how to edit them, and I was kind of looking for a way to expand my hobby of working on cars and motorcycles. I wanted to be able to kind of share with the world like what I was doing, and I thought it would be cool to kind of document the process for me and, you know, my family that lives across the country to be able to kind of see what I'm working on. And then if I was able to help other people kind of follow in the same passion that I have, you know, that was kind of a bonus. It seemed like, hey, if I can figure this out and I know how to do something, and I can teach, you know, people how to do it online, like, why not? So I've never done this or intended to do this for the revenue at all. I mean, I'm a year into being like, you know, really kind of consistent-ish. Like actually trying to put out content and get better, and I'm right at a year into it, and it does not pay for itself. I mean, even in the full year, I haven't even paid for the camera that I'm shooting on right now. So like, I don't do it for the money. I do it because I love working on the bikes. I love that when you guys respond and you're like, you encourage me to get out in the garage and you know, start working on my project, or hey, you know, what do I start off with? Like encouraging people to get into the hobby. And I feel like nowadays, and again, this is going to make me sound like an old man, but nowadays so many people are just like glued to their computers and playing games all the time, and they don't like get out and work with their hands. And like for me, it's just like a huge stress relief, and it makes me totally like zone out, and I'll go a whole Saturday without eating, just because I love just being out here like working on stuff and cutting stuff in half and putting it back together. And so I just kind of wanted to share that with you guys, and if I can encourage, you know, a couple of people to, you know, get out and kind of do the same thing, I think that's kind of the main goal. And just full transparency, you know, for a while it bugged me a lot when I got like a thumbs down or I got like a negative comment. But all of you guys with the positive comments and the thumbs ups, and like the people like buy shirts, like the fact that I've built something and then have sent shirts around the world, like totally blows my mind. And that's what like keeps me going. So I guess originally it was to kind of share the hobby, and then why I keep making videos is because I love, you know, the community, and you guys kind of reaching back out. I've met a couple of you in person, which has been awesome. I hope to, you know, meet more of you in the future, and as we take this thing to shows and we expand out into other projects. I'm really looking forward to actually meeting you guys in person and kind of putting faces to the numbers I see on the screen. I think that was enough rambling, and I hope I answered most of your questions, and if I missed some, I'll throw them in the next kind of video. But that's going to do it for this video. I know it was a little bit weird because there wasn't a whole lot of stuff done to the bike, but when we get some better weather, we can shuffle stuff around, and we still got plenty to do. Chain tensioner is going to be the next thing, followed by all the electronics. Then we'll be, you know, that many steps closer to getting it done. So if you liked this video, please do throw a thumbs up. Also, if you could, that little bell next to the subscribe button, that's for notifications. YouTube is kind of changing all of their algorithms, and I feel like a lot of you guys don't see my notifications or don't see the video pop up in your feed. If you haven't watched a video or two and some time goes by, then you won't get notified of the new videos. A lot of YouTubers are kind of really having struggling times with their view counts because of that. So if you do enjoy the content, hit that little bell to get the notifications. That ensures you guys will see it every time. Check out my site if you guys are interested in any kind of shirts or anything. Check out Instagram for you know, a little more frequent updates on the projects, and we'll see you guys soon.